Hello, and welcome everyone to our November one-day summit, Somatic Attachment Healing. My name is Allison, and I am your host for this workshop entitled Broken Connections, Experiential Strategies for Trauma and Attachment with Dr. Diane Poole Heller. Diane Poole Heller is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and expert in the field of attachment theory and trauma resolution. Her signature approach, DARE, Dynamic Attachment Repatterning Experience, provides therapists and individuals with relevant skills and practical exercises that facilitate healing from attachment and trauma wounds. Diane's training programs, books, lectures, and work as a therapist have helped a countless number of people in their healing journey towards experiencing greater intimacy, wholeness, and more fulfilling relationships. So we are thrilled to have you here with us today, Diane, and we will let you take it away.
Thank you, Allison. It's my privilege to be here with all of you. So thank you for having me. We're going to jump right in. I have a lot of information for you. So I just want to mention that when we start talking about early attachment, we start to respond to it as an audience and myself as well. So I just want you to kind of have this sense of quiet, gentle exploration, and where I'm going to be giving you some corrective experiences that help you along the way. And one of the things that's important about why we study trauma and attachment is what I found. I was teaching trauma resolution with somatic experience with Dr. Peter Levine for about 25 years. And I noticed that one of the common denominators of coming out of post-traumatic stress or difficult, overwhelming life events was this feeling of broken connection to our own bodies, to ourselves, broken connection to the ground, not being grounded, broken connection to our center, broken connection sometimes to feeling like there's anybody out there, and especially with intimate relationships and relationships in general. So I decided to take a deep dive into really looking at early attachment. If we go back to slide number 3, you'll see a picture of my dad. And I wanted to I know a lot of us have aging parents now, and sometimes we're missing them. Or my dad passed about 13 years ago, but I was sitting on his hospital bed with him, and we were sure he had gone. I was holding his hand, he was gone. And then all of a sudden he surprised me and he popped his blue eyes open completely wide, and he looked at me completely coming from, I don't know where source, but he had been in a death process, and there was no obscuration in his eyes. His personality or any constrictions or any object relations were gone. And really to see someone like that, I felt like it was the first time I ever saw my dad in terms of like really looking into his soul. And then to be seen by someone like that was really a powerful experience. And he says to me, I'm holding his hand, I thought he had died. Here he is back again. And he says, Diane, it's true. And I went, what? I thought, well, whatever he's going to say next is going to be true. And he said to me, it's all about love. And we know that, right? But there was something about his transmission of it coming from source or wherever, and it just changed the DNA in my cells. And I think as people and as therapists or caregivers or just human beings walking around on the planet, it's such a powerful message for all of us to take in. So it's Sunday, it's a good day to connect to. It's all about love. And that's really been a guiding force in my work. And I think for all of us when we're trying to have our relationships with people we care about and even people we don't even know yet, it really builds compassion. Well, a lot of times we have this idea that secure attachment is 3 meals a day, a roof over your head. It's a lot more than that. It has a lot more to do with really deep ways of connecting, skin-to-skin contact with parents and infants, and a good attachment gaze, and all sorts of other things. So let's take a look at what secure parents are able to offer us. First of all, I call it gourmet contact nutrition. And secure parents are attuned, they're present, they transmit secure attachment in terms of safety, they're consistently responsive to their child. There's a positive holding environment, which engenders basic trust. They have good boundaries, and they actually function as the empathetic other with the child, that someone that can respond to their needs, respond to their emotions. And they're also an organizing, regulating other. They're like a master regulator in the household, and they can align with the child's inner state. They reflect cues accurately. They're natural contingency detectors. And what we mean by that is you hang in there with someone until they experience feeling felt, or I sometimes call it getting gotten. They really get it that you get them. And you kind of have to hang in with people, because sometimes we think we get them when we don't actually. So it's good to check. And they have a melodic tone of voice, not a flat robotic tone of voice, which actually signals danger in the body. They are able to listen, really have their child feel heard. They're clear with their communication. They have a kind eye gaze. They have sort of a beam gleam, that when they look at you, you have the feeling that the eyes are communicating, "You're special to me," or "I love you," or, "You did a great job," or there's an appreciative quality to the eye gaze, a loving quality to the eye gaze with children. They're comfortable with both connection and individuation. There's affectionate, safe touch. Like I said, they're master regulators. They're able to calm when things get a little too amped up, and they're able to enliven when the child gets a little too shut down. So both are important. They're able to address problems, resolve conflicts. They have sort of a realistic optimism. And this is a really important one. They're able to repair misattunements. I mean, this isn't about being perfect. So all of those of you that are parents, just take that "I need to be perfect parent" pressure off your shoulders. Let that drop on the floor. And because we can repair misattunements, we're going to get off in our relationships, out of sync sometimes. And actually, when we learn how to repair and we are able to initiate it and also receive it, it actually builds relational resilience. So ideally, if you're a therapist or you're a partner or you're a parent, in the ideal scenario, you're sending secure attachment signals. And we also sometimes refer to them as social engagement signals. So these are things that really help a person move back to secure attachment. What I want to say about secure attachment is that we are biologically inherently designed for secure attachment. We come with that programming. John Bowlby talked about this many years ago. And that's a really wonderful thing for us to realize, that secure attachment, even if we have attachment disruption on top of it, it's there. It wants to come forward. And when it has the right relational environment, we do some healing around our attachment injuries, it will surface and kind of take over. So as a therapist, one of the things I like to do when I see someone moving from an attachment injury to secure attachment, sort of plant a flag in it. Like, look at that eye contact you just made with me. There was a lot of presence in that, a lot of connection. That's what secure attachment eye gaze is like. So it's helpful with your partner, your child, if you work with clients, to actually name what's happening, because so often people know they feel better, but they don't know why. And we kind of want to say why, so that they can take that out into the world and have it be a more conscious ability for them. So these are some of the secure attachment qualities that I wanted you to know. For children, when they have secure attachment, it will really engender vitality and aliveness. They feel safe to show up. They feel like they can be honest. They can be authentic. They have this secure base, this safe haven. So this secure base, secure attachment is not always about always being safe, but safety really helps us. Think about this in your own life. Safety really helps us, if we have that base, to then go out into the world and take risks. The ship doesn't belong in the harbor, right? To give your gift, make your contribution, try things you've never tried before, experiment in trying to have relationships and different work opportunities and all sorts of things that we might explore, sports, nature, arts, all that. So then if we have a secure base, it's really helpful, gives us kind of a platform to go out and explore. And then we know we can come back to our secure base. So that really is a helpful resource for all of us. And sometimes later, if our family didn't provide that, we can find friends that provide that, or partners or mentors or coaches or spiritual teachers, or, that sort of thing. It really is helpful to have that connection. Now for kids, of course, there's age appropriate individuation. Parents let their kids grow up and take on more responsibility and more, challenges as it's age appropriate. One of the things that's really cool to really think about too is secure attachment has a lot to do with humor and playfulness. So this is like a doctor's orders to go out and have more playtime, because playing actually is something that really bonds us. Whether it's our dog, our kids, our friends, our partners, ourselves, it really helps us move into secure attachment. So really important to widen your playtime. Make yourself a date on your calendar for play, and make sure that you have that built into your life, because it really makes a difference to support secure attachment. When you have parents, or started out with parents that it was easy to express your needs and they would meet them as much as they could, not always, of course, it makes it easier for children to express their needs, and they can feel their emotions. If they had somebody reflect emotions back to them, help them identify their emotions and reflect accurately, this really helps children build an accessible emotional range. They aren't disowning their relationships because that particular feeling was not allowed. And they tend to feel lovable, cared for, protected, and they perceive the world as friendly. They can relax in a relationship. So this is a really big contribution that happens when you're born into a pro-social family. In my opinion, that's a little bit like winning the jackpot or winning the lottery. And they feel that statistically, there's about 50% of the population has secure families. So that's really good. I see a lot of people with attachment injury, so it always feels like a high number to me, but I'm really glad that so many people test out to be secure. And let's take a look and do a little inventory for ourselves in the next slide. So you might want to do just a little bit of an inventory for yourself on what's easy for you. What's something you'd want to work on? Maybe is it easy to feel safe? Okay, so think about which of these are easier for you. Do you feel present in a particular relationship? Maybe you want to think of one relationship where it's easy for you to show up and be authentic. How's your tone of voice? Or you can be thinking about your partner or yourself. Is there a sense of safety in the relationship, or can you get back to it if things get ruffled? There's a sense of feeling protected inside the relationship bubble and in your own way of being in the world. There's safe, affectionate touch if it's an intimate relationship, or there's appropriate touch now with the pandemic, we're not doing much touch, but with strangers, of course, or even with friends, we're kind of doing virtual hugging until this settles down. But in general, when it's more normal, that would be something you'd look at. Eye gaze is sort of like beam gleaming. Again, that appreciative eye gaze. And what's nice is if you were at a party and your partner or your child was across the room with their friends, maybe all the way far from you, you can shoot somebody an I love you glance really easily. It doesn't cost anything, and it makes a really big difference to the attachment bond. So that's something that you might want to experiment with. You can even do this with your dog and see how your dog responds. It's very powerful. Our inherent ability to move to secure attachment is really, really powerful. The other thing, I want to give you some skills, some secure attachment skills to think about too, while we're going through this presentation. Comings and goings, how you meet and greet or how you leave for work or for an event or for a business trip or a vacation is really important for the attachments, secure attachment. So like I have friends, I love this. They both love chocolate, and they go out and they buy these really special truffles, all different. And each night they share one truffle at night before they go to sleep, and they kind of debrief their day and clear up and repair anything that might be hanging from, the day, if there's any stress. And they have this ritual, they do it every night. And that's what I mean about having a certain ritual that helps you, like you're leaving into sleep, basically. Also gives you time to debrief. That's a very strong secure attachment skill. And then when they get up in the morning, they don't just hide behind a newspaper or a computer, they cook breakfast together. So what are ways you can enhance ritual around your comings and goings? And I worked with a couple when I was in Scandinavia, and they were getting a little off in their relationship. They had, dogs and 2 or 3 kids, and they just were feeling a little irritated with each other. And so I just had them practice what Stan Tatkin, who is the developer of Pact, calls the welcome home hug. You can see a YouTube of his about that if you want to look on YouTube. It's just called the welcome home hug. But basically, I had them tell me how they connect after being away for work during the day. And the wife was saying, well, I'm making dinner and I'm trying to help the kids with their homework and I'm feeding the dog. And, in comes my partner. I'm going to call him Sven. Sven comes in and, and Sven says, yeah. And immediately she's telling me to take out the garbage or fix the toilet or, gives me all these lists of things to do. And so I just had them in the training actually do a little experiential vignette of doing it differently. And I said, what's it like for you, Sven, when you're going to come in the house? He goes, oh, as soon as I hit the doorknob, I'm just getting anxious and tense because I don't know what I'm going to walk into. And she's feeling stressed about getting dinner on the table. And so I said, well, this time, let's just try it a different way. And I said to the wife, let's call her Helga, I said, Helga, just turn the fire off on the stove. Let the kids play with what they're playing with, forget about the dog for a minute, and just put all of your attention on Sven walking in the door. And Sven, I want you to put all your attention on Helga. So I had them, like Americans sometimes do a triangle hug. I said, you want to do a full body hug where you're belly to belly in this hug. And then you stay in the hug and you're not thinking about tasks. You're not talking necessarily other than nice things to say to each other. And you're just waiting till both bodies regulate each other. So you wait until you start to relax into the hug where you really can be present in it. And then say Helga has a headache or something, then Sven would put his hand on her head, not she would put her hand on. He would regulate her headache. And say he has got low back pain, she would put her hand on his low back. And they would just stay in this body to body close hug until they feel regulated. And that's probably a little bit longer than the hugs that we normally do. But your body wants to be with other people that regulate you. So it's very bonding to have some kind of ritual like that. And then also being careful about, sending I love you messages through the eyes. All of these things can make a really big difference to how you're feeling in a relationship, can start to repair it. A lot of people's relationships break down when their attachment cues aren't being received or they're not actually sending them. And some of these rituals make it a lot easier to come back into a healthy relationship. And that's not rocket science. They're relatively easy to do. Now, sometimes certain ones will be easier than others for a couple, and you want to find the window that's open. I had a couple that I worked with, and the wife, I'll call her Sue. The wife, Sue, I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, avoidant attachment. She was avoidantly attached. So hugging was too confronted for her. She would shut down. She couldn't be present in a hug. So we had to work with what worked for her. Eye gaze was a little intense, but we found that if her partner just put his foot on her top of her foot gently without shoes on, and they sat next to each other, she could take that in, and then that could relax her, or then she could be more available for conversation, eventually hugging, eye contact. It got a little bit easier, but we had some things to work on to heal attachment injury, to make her a little more connected to secure attachment so they could move in that direction in their relationship. So whenever we adapt away from secure attachment, it's an intelligent response given the circumstances we were in. Our attachment system's very, very responsive to the relational environment that we're living in. So this is just, I'm trying to give you some ideas of things you can do right away, and try it out in your relationship. So let's move to this exercise where you just, for a moment, feel your feet, feel your seat, wiggle in your chair a little bit, because we ground in our feet and our seat. Your seat on the seat, just wiggle around. I can see some of you are wiggling. good wiggles. and just take a moment, maybe breathe, just take a moment to connect to yourself even more. And just think for a moment, who in your life, at any time in your life, this could be somebody living or that's already passed, has represented secure attachment to you, at least in a major way. Maybe not perfectly. This is not about being perfect, because as long as we know how to repair, we can get back to secure attachment. So who represents that to you? Was it a teacher in school, a doctor when you were growing up, your parents, one parent, a step parent, an elder sibling, a dog in your life, a best friend, your spouse now, your kids. Who do you really have the capacity to rest in the relational field? You just can relax with them, can be in the same room, and you can be knitting or reading, and they can be on their computer, but you still feel this connection. Just noticing this easy flow of in and out, coming together and being alone, but also being available for connection, that you're fine in your aloneness and you're fine in your connection with that person. And as you bring them in and you sort of just imagine them, to see what happens when you embody that. Like, what do you experience in your body? What kind of thoughts start to happen? What sort of emotions might start to show up? Just rest in that relationship. And again, it could be someone that you're missing because they passed away, like a grandmother or someone you're close to. I know we've had a lot of loss in the last few years. So just to be gentle with yourself about that. But kind of focus on appreciating their ability to be in a healthy relationship with you. And this could even be a relationship with yourself. Just noticing when you're kinder to yourself, when you're more protective towards yourself, when you're playful, when you allow yourself time to enjoy your favorite activities, art, dance, music, nature, sailing, mountain climbing, rock climbing, whatever it might be. Being with your special friends or partner or children or family. And just noticing what it feels like to land in secure attachment. And you might be focusing on somebody who has some areas of secure attachment and some areas that don't do so well. That can happen. And just see if you can focus on the part that they do well. And sort of resource yourself while we're going into talking about this. Somebody's asking, does everyone has, I believe, this is my belief, I believe everybody has secure attachment, and most of us can recover a significant amount of it. Maybe not everything, because sometimes there's a lot of trauma that we need to work through. But I think we can make great gains in coming back to secure attachment, even if we've had a difficult time. And yeah, people always ask this. Sometimes it's hard to find someone. I totally get that. But just thinking about any teacher you've ever had that was kind to you, any doctor that ever gave good care, or a nurse, anytime you had a good relationship with an animal, it will, yes, Doris, it will feel like home. Marcy's saying she feels calm and energized. So if that's harder to find, maybe by the end of the talk, you'll have some more ideas of how you might take a look in that direction. And there are secure attachment people on the planet. I even recommend that you start watching secure attachment TV and movies. It kind of primes your secure attachment system. And while I'm thinking about it, I think the movie Brooklyn is lovely about secure attachment, and also the movie Lion, and also Parenthood, the TV series, not the movie. I'm not saying the movie's just kind of comedy, but the Parenthood, they have problems, if they work through them. They have problems that they eventually hear each other. That's the kind of thing you want to be dosing yourself with. And I sort of myself am on a violence fast right now. I'm not watching anything violent. I'm not even watching the news too much, because I just find it's energy draining. I will eventually come back to it. I watch the news in little doses, but not too much for me right now. So you might want to just notice what you're attracted to on television and see if you can watch more of the healthier family dynamics. That really helps prime your attachment system to secure attachment as well. So someone's asking about how to build their relationship with their mom, who doesn't give touch, avoids eye contact, and lives with a lot of fear. Oh, and that's really hard because your dad just died. I'm sorry for that loss for you, Kristen. Yeah, you gotta find the window that's open. And I don't know if she's willing to read anything, but there's a couple books. I mean, I have The Power of Attachment, the book that I wrote, but there's also Amir Levine's book, and Rachel Heller's book called Attached. There's a lot of good things to kind of just start to have people become a little bit more aware. I have lots of exercises people can do in the books, why I mention it, not trying to sell you books, but these kinds of exercises can make a big difference if she's willing to you have to kind of see where she's available, if kind words work the best, or taking her out on special activities if she's able to take that in, I don't know, to a British tea or something, or a nice walk in the park. Just have to look and see if you can build from there, would be one suggestion. But I am going to give you some more ideas as we go along. That's great, Debbie, that you got your dog. You have a secure attachment relationship. Dogs are wonderful. I don't know if you could get your mom a dog, but dogs kind of bring out the secure attachment people because they're usually really friendly. Get a really friendly, snuggly dog. Feeling loved. Oh, that's wonderful. Maya, that's great. And Julianne, strength and connection. Deborah's feeling comforting. Okay, that's beautiful. So let's continue in our little exploration here. That's the ideal scenario. Okay, so you notice this, they're sleeping just together, but you can see this connection. You can feel it just in the picture. We're genetically programmed to bond to our caregivers. So this is a story from a long time ago. Now it's probably 25 years ago, but there were twins born in a hospital and one of them was not making it. And the hospital policy is always to have babies in separate bassinets. And this nurse had this strong instinct to put them in the same bassinet. And immediately, this is from 1995, Kyrie and Brielle, immediately the thriving infant put her arm around the one that wasn't doing so well, and the other one came back and gained her aliveness and probably survived as a result of it. So this is like right out of the womb. These kids are just born, and this is how strong this instinct. I just want to give you this because it really shows how attachment, we come pre-programmed for it from the very get-go. I think we're even influenced about attachment in utero. We often get wounded in relationship, but we also heal in relationship, and we're working right brain to right brain. Attachment, most of what's surfacing in attachment that will be helpful is coming from the right brain. Basically, when you have secure attachment, there's a couple of things that really develop. One is empathy. Children have a sense of empathy. They feel the empathy from you. They develop empathy with other people. We start to have a good integration between right and left brain. And it also brings us into this sense of interconnection in the world with everyone. We start to feel interconnected. We start to feel an orientation to all of us, like a global citizen versus an us versus them kind of perspective. And all of this really helps us heal. My fantasy for a relationship revolution would be if we could just have people understand and practice secure attachment skills, it could bring us into a much deeper state of harmony that I think the world greatly needs right now. But I think understanding attachment and really working with attachment can really, really be helpful. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens with avoidant attachment. So one of the things is you're just usually what the setup for secure avoidant attachment is. This is when things don't go in an ideal scenario, is what one of you were talking about with your mother, who avoids contact, doesn't like to touch, doesn't engage much, like with hugging, that sort of thing. That's usually an indication of avoidant attachment. And that often sets up when people have a history where they have just been somewhat neglected, like they had parents that for whatever reason, maybe they had unresolved trauma, they just weren't very present. They weren't very emotionally aligned with their child. They didn't reflect emotions accurately. Sometimes they were smiling over anger, which is really confusing for a little one growing up. And the other way people can adapt to avoid, and remember, these are intelligent adaptations. You're adapting to the relational environment that you're exposed to as a little one. And our attachment styles can evolve as we grow up, and they can change later on because they're very sensitive to the emotional environment. And also you can have a mix of attachment styles. Say you had one parent that was neglectful, you might have an avoidant reaction to them, and you have another parent that was maybe kind of a smother mother or didn't have much boundary, and they sort of over interfered with you, and then you might have a different adaptation related to that parent. So just so you know, you can also go to our website if you want. It's Diane Poole Heller, my name, that's all, dianepooleheller.com, and there's a free attachment quiz on there that will give you sort of an idea where you fall in terms of secure. It's like a little pie chart where you fall with secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized attachment, which we're going to talk about today. And then it gives you some other information additionally. It's free, you can have your partner do it. When you take an attachment quiz, though, make sure you're taking it and you're thinking about one relationship at a time, And maybe when you're not on your best day, because that'll show you your default position for attachment. Maybe you're tired or a little sick or something, or how you react when you're under stress. That will give you a clear picture of your attachment history. So basically, in avoidant attachment, the child's reaching out for connection, but the parent is unavailable, and they're either emotionally not responsive. They're consistently not responsive, whereas secure, they're consistently responsive. And so the child learns that it just doesn't work. So they start to like get thrown back into themselves, sort of in a little bubble of isolation, and they're sort of left to their own devices, and they start to develop a lived experience that relationships don't work very well. So they don't tend to rely on them. They tend to feel like they're not that important. They sort of dismiss the value of relationship. And parents can either be neglectful or actively rejecting. There can be like a hateful look coming through the eyes towards the child, or an angry look a lot too much of the time. Or sometimes it'll set up where parents are present, but they're only present when they're teaching you a skill, like learning to read, learning to ride a bike, learning math or something, learning language. And then other than that, they're only there for left brain activities when you're learning something like that intellectually. So that will influence then that there's not much sense of emotion. There's not much emotional resonance. Sometimes the range of emotion needs to be widened because they just learned to disown their emotions because nobody reflected or nurtured them when they were having an emotional response. They kind of feel like they're in an emotional desert. And so gradually over time, we want to sort of see if we can make it safe for someone with avoidant attachment to feel that tremendous vulnerability of wanting to reach out and connect again when they're doing that. That's really trusting, and that we want to make sure we're present, we're really there for them when that happens. We know that it's a very vulnerable space for them when they start to feel the desire to connect again, because everything in them tells them it's not a good idea based on their early experience. And remember, these attachment patterns start to form in utero, and right, the first year of life is so important on what we then build this sort of non-conscious relational template that we base our decisions and how we interact in relationships very much after that. So it's something that's really important to understand. What I love about talking about attachment is that it's really helps you understand that these adaptations probably happened a long time ago in most cases. And we stop blaming our partners for not showing up in certain ways. And we stop blaming ourselves. We start to see that, okay, it's a bigger picture, and we can start to get blame and shame out of the picture. And that's a really big step forward. And I do believe that people can recover to a large extent their ability to function as secure attachment partners or people in the world. And they may have to learn it because maybe they didn't have that, where it's not just ingrained in your muscles and your cells and your brain and your nervous system from the very beginning, but it's something that's teachable and learnable and practicable. And that's what I think is a very hopeful message about secure attachment. So the other thing with avoidant people that have adapted to the avoidant, they tend to be very self-focused and not very other-focused, because in their experience, other doesn't help much. Doesn't mean they don't have friends and stuff, but when the rubber hits the road, they just don't feel like they can rely on anybody, which is, we're trying to heal that so they can broaden their world. I had a client that was avoidant. His mother was depressed when he was in utero, and then 6 weeks after he was born, she took her life. So you can imagine the trauma. His father reacted to losing his wife by going into a deep dive into grief, totally understandable. But this little infant had nobody because his father was deep in grief and his mother left. So when we were working with him, he started to do these unconscious things. One of the things he was doing was leaning. He was leaning like so far. I'm not going to do it, although I'll go off the screen, but he leaned so far, was where he's going to fall out of the chair, and he didn't know why he was leaning. And I kept saying, would you like someone to lean into? And he'd say, no, I can do it myself, which is what an avoidant person would say. And then he started saying, this is getting kind of painful. And he started to put his hand under his head, and he goes, my neck's really hurting, leaning like this. And I said, well, again, would you like someone to lean into? Because we were in a training when he's got good taste. He picked the best body worker, and she came up and he leaned into her body and you could just see his whole system just relax. He just, you know how kids like look like cooked spaghetti when they're on their parents' shoulders when they're relaxed. He's just like draping into this person's body back when you could do such things like that in person. And his whole system relaxed. He was able to take in that contact from the body worker. And I think that was the first time his adult body had had that kind of connection. And it really started to bring him back to secure attachment. And then the same thing, his hands started to go out like to reach for connection. And he goes, I don't know why my hand's doing this, because again, it's not conscious, but this is the automatic nature of secure attachment starting to come up when there's a safe environment that we had created in our therapeutic relationship. And I wasn't explaining to him what was happening. I said, just feel it. And he was kind of like, I'm trying to do it on the screen. He was sort of like stroking the air like I am right now. And he goes, it's really strange. It doesn't feel futile. So he started to feel like someone could be there. And then he made a deep connection. We had a dog in the room when my dog was there, and he was making a deep connection with the dog first, and then with me, and then with the whole group. And it just started to shift him towards secure attachment. That doesn't happen in one little session, but you can see that he was moving largely from avoidant to reconnecting in secure. And that's what I'm just trying to communicate today, that it is possible to move from attachment injury to attachment healing. And that's what we really want to emphasize. Just a few more things about avoidant, and then we'll move on. Avoidants tend to go deep into themselves. So they might get really into a movie, or really into a computer game, or really into meditation or something. And then if you go to approach them, let's say your partner's avoidant, you say, hey, honey, I want to take you to your favorite restaurant, Pinocchio's or something, Italian restaurant. They might be abrupt, like they might be kind of harsh when they react. And what I want you to understand is to not take that personally. Because when an avoidant is deep into their what's called parallel attention, doing something themselves, they tend to do a lot of activities alone. It's a little bit like scuba diving. They have to, it's stressful for them sometimes to make a transition from deep aloneness into connection. So they'll sort of react by being annoyed. It doesn't mean they don't want to connect with you. It means that it's a hard transition to go from deep scuba diving, you kind of like, they get the bends, right, coming up into contact. So it's better to say something like, hey, honey, I know you're involved in something. Is 20 or 30 minutes or 10 minutes enough time? I'd like to talk to you about our dinner plans, but take your time. Then they can surface themselves, and then they're ready to have the conversation. So there's little things that really help if you understand the attachment system, and you don't get so bruised, because it hurts when somebody's abrupt when you're inviting them to their special dinner and they go, hey, leave me alone, I'm in the middle of something. That doesn't feel good, and you can take that very personally. But a lot of times it's not personal. One of the things that avoidant people struggle with is they don't really feel like they belong. So I want you to really have compassion for yourself, or for your friends, or for your partner, or your kids that might be, or your parents that might be struggling with this. They often feel unwelcome. So one exercise I give people, I wanted to make sure I included some corrective experiences in our talk today, is a welcome to the world exercise. If you could design your own welcome to the world, whether that's coming in at birth, who would you want to be there? What would the environment be like? Maybe there's soft music or lovely colors, or you have a whole tribe of people that you later discover love you along the way as you go through life. You bring them, import them all for your birth, so you can see there are going to be these loving people, your first love, or your partner, or your children, or your pets along the way. And you start to work with that not feeling welcome wound to start to resource that in a corrective experience. A corrective experience, by the way, is basically a contradictory experience. It's an experience that starts to support secure attachment, and in the process, it might bring up wound that then needs to be held and understood, and best to do it with another person, because being alone too much is a problem for the avoidant to begin with. And these kinds of exercises can really be helpful. So you might later want to journal about how you would design your welcome to the world, who would be there. One of my clients said they wanted warm, loving hands. I had another client that loved horses, and she said, I want to be born into a field of flowers with all my horses. She was a rancher, so she had lots of horses around me, and I would just see their soft nuzzles, just their faces would be all around me. And then that was her welcome to the world. So whatever it is, there's no wrong answer. It's wonderful to explore that. Maybe you have something coming up just as I'm talking about it. And then, of course, with the woman that was bonding with horses, we worked to have her eventually include humans as she was ready for that. And that brought her closer to secure attachment. So one of the things that you can think about with the kind eyes, I want to give you another experiential exercise, is just take a moment, again, to feel your feet in your seat. And I'd like you just to imagine looking out into the world and seeing kind eyes looking back at you. That could, maybe you see a picture of the Dalai Lama, I'm not making a religious statement, or a picture of an animal that has a really contactful eyes. My dog used to make great contact. He's passed away now. Your child, your friend, it could be a complete stranger, but just anybody that has sort of a presence in their eyes. And just notice as you see those eyes, what that might bring up wound about not having kind eyes. It might also bring up just pleasure and relaxation from seeing kind eyes. And then just see if you can allow that kindness to come in, if you can let it come closer to you or actually embody it a little bit and just feel that kind eyes connection can be a nice correction for attachment gaze that hasn't gone so well, perhaps. But this is a nice exercise for anyone. And then just be a little aware, maybe for the rest of the day, whoever you encounter, to see if you can intentionally send them a kind eye transmission, like I care about you, or you're special to me if there's someone around, or you do a Zoom call with somebody later, and just see if you can practice sending that kind eyes as well. That's another experiential exercise you can play with a bit. So some of the sample repair messages for the avoidant would be, I'm here for you. It's okay to be vulnerable and reach out. I'm really happy you're in my life. You belong here. Things like that can be really helpful. And then let's take a look at the characteristics of ambivalent attachment. One of the things that happens with ambivalent attachment is that there's a lot of fear of abandonment. Reason that sets up as such a difficulty is because very often parents were a little bit on again, off again. They were loving and they really were there, and then they had their own attachment history wounds that would show up, or for whatever reason, they would shift and they would be unpredictable and inconsistent. So there's inconsistent responsiveness with ambivalent attachment. So one of the challenges with that is that children, normally relax into the secure attachment base when it's there, but when they don't know when it's going to shift, it actually creates anxiety. They're just waiting for being dropped, basically, not physically, but just in the connection. And so they're anxious about it, and they have a hard time not always tracking the other person to try to see where they're at and if they're going to be there or not there. And then they're trying to figure out, well, if I do this, or I say this, or I look like this, does that mean that I'll have more connection? So they're a little over concerned with trying to stabilize the relationship, and the relationship feels disrupted a lot. So that makes them feel particularly anxious, and they put a lot of energy into trying to connect and stabilize a connection that they don't believe will ever stabilize, based on their early life experience, right? That pattern got built in when they were really little. So what'll happen is, if you think about a signal cry, babies make a cry, right? To say, I want change, I want to play, I want food, I want to burp, whatever it is. That's a signal cry. They cry because they can't talk, they can't communicate otherwise. But later in adults, for instance, the avoidant attachment will shut down the attachment system because it wasn't working. They didn't get enough feedback from another person to feel like it felt good to have their attachment system on. So they basically adapt, and this is tied into survival. This isn't a conscious decision, and it is tied into survival. So it has a lot of fear based in how it formed, and then as we come out of it, we have to deal with that. They shut their attachment system down and they turn their signal cry off, whereas the ambivalent It's opposite to that. They amp up their signal cry because they're trying to get the attention of the person to come back into contact with them because they did have some love and they want some more, understandably. And then their signal cry stays on. They amp up the attachment system way more than it's designed to be. And so they're over concerned. They're constantly thinking, is this person there for me? They're always scanning the person's face. They tend to misinterpret any attachment cues they see as negative. That's where they get in trouble in terms of really getting hurt, because they tend to read situations as not wanting to be there for them. I had an example of this. I had a friend that I was at a restaurant. I wasn't expecting her. She came unexpectedly. And when she came in, the whole front of the restaurant's windows and the sun was coming in. So she was backlit. I couldn't even see who it was. So I didn't respond because I didn't know it was her. I didn't normally I'd jump out of my chair and I'd rush over and I'd, be smiling and eye gaze and all that. I didn't know it was anybody I knew. So I didn't react because I couldn't see her because she was backlit. And she's still bringing it up to me. You didn't smile when you saw me. And I'm like, I know. She's got ambivalent attachment because I didn't know who you were, but that doesn't work enough. She's really felt like I wounded her because I didn't react like I normally would react if I'd known it was her. So we've had this conversation like 3 times. But that's the kind of sensitivity I'm talking about, that she read my lack of response as a big rejection and a big abandonment. And so we had to repair that. So we finally have repaired it, but it took some while for that to calm down. So I want you to understand that there's a hypersensitivity to facial expression, to gestures, to whether you return a phone call or a text, and it can really be upsetting for someone with ambivalent attachment if there's not a response in a timely manner. So one of the things that helps a lot calm this overactivated attachment system is reassurance. You're really important to me. You're my best friend. I really care about you. You want to make sure you're sending really reassuring information. There was another story that Amir Levine told me a while ago about a couple that he was seeing, and I can't remember exactly the profession, but the husband would go off to work. They newly married. They clearly loved each other deeply. She was staying home, and she had ambivalent attachment. So she would text him a lot. And then in the beginning, he would answer, but he had a really difficult job. I can't remember if he was a prosecuting attorney or a surgeon, but something where you just couldn't be on your phone in the middle of what you were doing. And so he would start to screen the texts and not answer right away. And because she had ambivalent attachment, she read that as, he doesn't love me, he doesn't care about me, he's going to divorce me. She would catastrophize that because it's really a strong anxiety that comes up. And remember, this is tied into survival. So you can't just say, hey, just relax. That's not going to help. But so by the time he would come home for dinner at whatever time, 5 o'clock, she would be upset all day because he hadn't answered the texts or responded to her phone calls. And so she would be really mad by the time he came in the door. And so she'd immediately pick a fight, and then they'd end up fighting all night instead of what she really wanted was to hug and snuggle and debrief the day and be together. And so they went to therapy, and they worked out, well, okay, love's not the problem. You both love each other a lot. What needs to happen? And what they worked out together, they came up with a solution themselves, is that he would write a text on his phone that would just say, I'm thinking about you, I love you, whatever words they crafted. And then he didn't have to rewrite the text. He could just resend the text. So anytime he was rushing between whatever he was doing, he would just hit the button, say, I'm thinking about you, I love you, whatever that was. And she would get that. And she didn't need it to be a different text. She just needed to know that he was thinking about her, which he was anyway. So that calmed her attachment system down and saved them lots of fights. And they were able to reconnect just from reassurance. Now, what I want to mention to you is when you're helping somebody or you're moving through your own avoidant attachment or ambivalent attachment and you're in a healing practice, you don't have to do it forever, because eventually as you heal, you're more based in secure attachment and it gets easier. You trust people more, you're relaxed in the relationship, you have more confidence that your partner's there for you, or you're there for your child, or your child's there, is responding. You're there in a way that some of these things that I'm suggesting you do as corrective experiences, you don't need to do quite so much. But then when you're stressed or you're sick, you might have what we sometimes call an implicit memory moment, which just means not conscious yet, where you get hijacked by your attachment injury and you respond out of that. But as you learn and you start to own your own attachment system, you go, okay, the story I'm making up about that is this person. That person didn't smile at me. I'm making up this story that they don't like me, they hate me, I'm not their friend anymore. And you can notice it and kind of go, wait a minute, I just need to check this out with this person, right? So you start to understand your sort of unconscious but very repetitive tendencies, and you start to work with ways to move into a healthier perspective with it. It saves you a lot of suffering, and it saves the relationship a lot of suffering, and you can get back to what we're supposed to be doing, enjoying each other. And I believe people really deserve to have love and enjoyment in their relationships. So I'm really trying to help people find their way back to that. So another thing with ambivalent attachment is sometimes people, because they're trying to stabilize the relationship so much, they're so over focused on the other person. So this would start as a baby, so like over focus on mom or dad, and they lose connection to themselves. And the biggest defining characteristic of ambivalent attachment is fear of abandonment. But here's the predicament. If you've already abandoned yourself because you're only focused on other people and what they think and how they're responding or not responding, and you're not connected to you, you're already abandoned by you. So no matter what somebody else does, it can feel good in the moment, but until you start to also heal by connecting to you, the Diane of Dianeness, or the Susanness of Susan, or the Tomness of Tom, or the Billness of Bill, the essential you, that is a practice for the ambivalent to start to heal, is to really start to feel what they need, what they want, who they are, what their values are, what their heart of hearts says they are, to really connect to that sense of self. So you might just take a moment to think about that. How is it your relationship to you? Is there self-love there? Is there self-compassion there? Is there connection there? Do you know yourself? Do you feel like your attention gets grabbed by another person as soon as they show up? Just to take a moment to be kind to yourself and really connect to yourself. Sometimes I do an exercise where I'll just have people, I'm going to show you this in a minute. I'm going to grab my shoes. Is I'll have somebody sitting in a session, and then I'll say, okay, let's just open your eyes enough that you can see my shoes, like the tip of my shoes. But the shoes represent another person, right? And so sometimes as soon as they see my shoes, they immediately lose themselves. And I go, okay, let's go back and reconnect to self like we were just doing together. All together, we're all together in this healing of attachment. Everybody in the world has probably some things that could be helpful. And then as soon as you see the shoes, just see if you lose your focus and go to the other person. So we want to see if we can stay with ourselves so that we can then have an awareness of self and other, which is more like secure. We're aware of ourselves and the other. And the third thing is the relational field between us. How is that feeling? Is that feeling connected? Is that feeling a little ruffled or irritated or scary, or what's happening in that relational field? So I think one of the corrective experiences for the ambivalent is to actually receive more. Can you allow, when you notice caring behaviors coming to you, can you allow yourself to notice them and take them in? Because I worked with someone one time, and she was saying, oh, my partner never does this, my partner never does that, my partner's not around, I think I'm going to break up with him. And then I said, wait a minute, you've been with this guy for 2 years. Let's see, is there anything he's doing that you like? And she said, oh, well, first she was mad at me for asking, because it was not her reality. And I kept pressing her on it. And she said, well, he travels a lot, but he always calls me every night to see how the day went. I went, well, that's pretty nice. And anything else? And she's kind of getting shocked when she says it. She goes, well, because he's gone a lot, he always takes me on these 3 or 4 day weekends so we can have a lot of time together, because he's not around very much. And so I someplace really nice. I'm like, well, that's nice. And she's sort of shocking herself now. And I said, well, is there anything else? And she said, well, he always buys me gifts when he travels. He brings something back, and they're always things I like, which makes me think he knows me. right? And so we kept doing this, and she was like, this is so interesting because I never think about these things. She just dismisses all the caring behaviors. And so she's able to notice them first of all. And then I said, well, okay, what happens if you just put all the caring behaviors like a big smorgasbord on the table in front of you and take them in? And this is what I want you to get to. And she said, oh, I can't do that. My stomach, my whole body just constricted. And I said, okay, let's take 1% of what's there. And she goes, oh, I can do that. And her stomach relaxed and she could feel fulfillment and satisfaction. But fulfillment and satisfaction is really difficult for the ambivalent. So this was a really big corrective experience for her. And then she goes, oh, I think I could take a little more. And I said, well, okay, how much? Because I went 5%. I said, okay, great, 5%. And she could stay relaxed and have this feeling, unfamiliar feeling to her of satisfaction and fulfillment. You see, it's wired in the nervous system and the lived experience of the person to reject caring behaviors, because if they relax into the caring behavior, they'll actually allow all their defenses to go down and their attachment system will calm down. And that's tied into survival. When their attachment system calms down, it's like a red alert. They think something bad's going to happen, like they're going to lose the other person. But she found that she could feel fulfillment and satisfaction by actually receiving the love that was there in her relationship. And so she left feeling really good about her relationship. When she came into the session, she was thinking about leaving. She said to me on the way out, she goes, you know what? My boyfriend's going to be really happy I had this session today. I said, so your job is to stay present, to notice caring behaviors that he's doing and stay present for them, and not deflect and not go into yes, but he didn't do this, or yes, but da, 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 because ambivalent tends to reject caring behaviors as much as they want them. They want them more than anything, but they have to recognize, that's part of what I mean about owning your attachment system. They have to recognize that sometimes they don't let it in, and they aren't aware of that. So once they're aware of it, they can practice staying present to then receive. That's another corrective experience. I promised you a couple, and I think we've done that. So we're not going to have time. I want to have time for Q&A. So I just want to mention the disorganized. It's the most complicated. There's a lot of information in your slides about them. There's a link you can get a handout on the slides to have all this information. But it's when there's a parent's been too scary or too chaotic. And so you have the attachment system wanting to bond, but the instinct, the defensive response is wanting to stop attachment, because the person that you're trying to attach to, we're programmed to, when we feel scared, to go to our parent for safe haven. But if our parent's the source of fear, we lose safe haven and we lose the parent. So that's where safety is really important, really how to help ourselves feel safe and help the relationship dynamics work towards safety, to deactivate that defensive response of wanting to fight or wanting to flight or going into freeze when intimacy goes to a certain level in a relationship. So that's a really important category to understand as well. Disorganized attachment, we could spend days on just that, but we want to emphasize safety and emphasize protection, and bringing in corrective experiences around safety and protection, which will really help someone regulate. There can be high states of dysregulation with disorganized attachment. You can have disorganized tilted towards avoidant, where those extreme behaviors of the avoidant come into play, or you can have disorganized ambivalent, where you can move into that sort of clinginess of the ambivalent or the overfocus on other, or you can be oscillating between avoidant and ambivalent and disorganized. So it's a more complicated situation, but again, can be sorted out. So I want to leave you with a takeaway of this is a hopeful message. There are lots of ways that we can learn secure attachment skills and practice them, like practicing staying present for caring behaviors for the ambivalent, or for the avoidant, allowing connection, like leaning in when someone's having an emotional response, which is very hard for the avoidant, but practicing it, or just saying, hey, you know what, this is getting too intense for me. I need to take a break. I'm going to walk the dog for 15 minutes, but I will be back. And I do want to hear what you have to say. And I do want to be there for you in the grief of losing your mother or whatever that was. And they have to learn how to do that, but we can learn how to do it. We are fundamentally able to do that. So in most cases, there's lots of hope for humanity. There's lots of hope for all of us. Things can get easier and love can get more accessible. And like my dad said, it's all about love. So I do want to take some questions before we end today.
For sure. So I'll read some questions too. So we got a question. Does the research say anything about the importance of frequency of interaction when it comes to secure attachment with adults?
I don't know that it's, I mean, obviously it's consistent responsiveness if you're talking about parents and children, or ideally, there's enough contact for you to feel that you're in a good relational field, but I don't think there's not any research I'm aware of, let me put it that way, about how much time that would take, or how many interactions you would have. I don't know that anybody's been able to do research on that. But it's the quality of interaction. And of course, it's just like watering a plant. I mean, you need water, you need to nurture relationships. You can't usually let a plant go for too long, it starts to wither. So I think just you could self-evaluate that in your relationships by either talking about it with your partner, or talking about it with your kids, or talking about it with your friends in terms of what really works in an ideal scenario, that keeps your relationship healthy and growing. That would be one way to think about that. Great question.
Great. Thanks, Diane. How to stop oneself from relentlessly seeking attachment with people who can't or won't attach?
Well, I I kind of did a garage sale on my relationships in 2001, and I just started putting more energy into people that were available intentionally, or that I felt good around, that I felt safe around, that I felt enthusiastic around, that I felt more alive around. And I just started putting less energy. I didn't cut people off necessarily, but I just didn't put so much energy into people that weren't available. And I think then you gradually build a support system, people that are affirming, they're empowering, they want to be in your life. And I think that could be a gradual but interesting practice. And then how is it for you to receive high quality caring behaviors if you're used to kind of, I don't know, scraps of attention? How is it to move into a more gourmet contact nutrition? And then to bring, and things might come up, fear might come up. Then just think of it as like, okay, I'm just going to take 1%. I'm just going to take 5%. Just practice receiving and staying present with the amount of love and connection you can handle, because we have to build our capacity. It's two things usually, the other people, what they're doing, but also our capacity to take in nourishment. Okay. That's a great question. Thank you. I hope it goes easier for you.
Thanks, Diane. What are ways to connect with yourself to keep from abandoning yourself, specifically for ambivalently attached folks?
Well, I think noticing what your inner critic is saying. Sometimes, like even if you drop something out of the refrigerator, which I've been doing a lot lately, instead of going, "Oh, you stupid," just say, "Oh, honey, you're a little clumsy today." It's just, how do you pay attention to how do you talk to yourself? Do you talk to yourself in a compassionate way? And if you're not, very often we're not, just see if you can take a moment and change it. Just go, okay, you might first say, "Oh, that was really stupid." Just go, "No, okay, I'm going to reframe that. You know what? You're a little clumsy today, and it's okay. You're doing really well in so many other areas. I love you." Just to start to send really loving, kind messages to yourself. And this sounds like a benign exercise, but this can bring up a lot if you're not used to receiving self-love. This can be a year-long practice. But just noticing how you can say to yourself, how you communicate to yourself. Do you do self-caring behaviors? Do you allow yourself to have playtime? Do you make sure you have time with people that you care about, whether it's Zoom or in person, or however we can arrange it with the COVID and everything? But just see if you can up all the secure attachment qualities that we talked about at the very beginning. See if you can intentionally build more of them into your life through people and through how you treat yourself. That could be really, really helpful. What a beautiful question. Good luck with that. I hope that goes really well.
How can you support someone who has experienced trauma to find a space of secure attachment?
Well, really, I think of all attachment adaptations, a little bit of relational trauma, and the corrective experiences I've talked about can be really helpful. When there's been more severe trauma, I think of that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's disorganized attachment, but relying on safety is really important. And I think for people, mostly if you're working with trauma, I think it really helps if you can find a trauma-informed and attachment-informed therapist to help you. Or if you have a really skillful partner that's interested in supporting you in that way. It doesn't always have to be through therapy or spiritual work or whatever you choose. I think reading some of the books can be helpful if that feels like a good entry point. And just to be very gentle with yourself. With trauma, you're also needing to re-regulate the nervous system, like somatic experiencing that Dr. Peter Levine developed. And with the attachment work, I think attachment and trauma work, when they go hand in hand, they're sort of a marriage made in heaven. I think working on both of those at the same time can be really helpful. Trauma could be so many different things. I mean, it's different how you work with a car accident or a natural disaster versus abandonment or sexual abuse, or, so it's a little bit broad of a question. I appreciate the question, but I think getting the right support, whatever that means for you, is really important. And I think trying to do it alone is just very difficult. I mean, if you had a heart condition, you probably wouldn't try to do it alone, right? I think getting the right support, and also because so much injury happens in relationship, we also heal in relationship when we get a good support person to hold a container for us while we're healing. So that's a big question and a beautiful question. And I think getting the right support in place is really, really helpful.
Great. Thanks, Diane. You said that attachment patterns start to form in utero. Can you talk more about what we know about that?
Well, what they're thinking is, like, say if you have a woman who's pregnant and she's in an abusive relationship, the baby's hearing the yelling or feeling if the person's getting hit, the baby's part of their body, so the baby's taking that in. They say babies in utero even download the mother's brain, the mother's emotions, the mother's taste preferences. I mean, we just basically embody what's going on with mom. And so they think that really can have a deep impact on eventually the relational template that we come into the world with. And certainly when there's abuse, I'm going to the worst case scenario here because we didn't talk so much about disorganized, but it's definitely be disorganized. Then the baby's nervous system's deregulated. Even how the brain is forming, the brain forms differently in a pro-social, safe environment with the family. The brain actually develops more of the medial prefrontal cortex and all the different parts of the brain, right brain, that are involved in relational connectedness. So you're much more aware of relationship and feel comfortable in relationship. If it's unsafe, your brain is, because your brain's trying to adapt the environment and give you the best shot it can give you. It's an intelligent response, either one. If there's a hostility, or you're born into a war zone, maybe your parents are fantastic, but you're in a war zone, so you're picking all that up. You're picking up beyond your parents. I mean, even they say collective traumas in your DNA when you're born, ancestral traumas in your DNA, but let's just focus on parenting for now. Then if you're in a dangerous or chaotic circumstance when you're in utero or early in the first year of life, then the defensive structures of the brain will be more emphasized and have more connections to them. So you'll have a tendency to always be scanning for danger. You'll have a tendency to perceive the world as dangerous and relationships as untrustworthy or scary. And that will impact the way your nervous system operates and the way your brain actually forms. But later in life, we can help people come back to secure attachment, or whenever we can address it. It's easier if you started out with secure attachment to expand it than it is if you started out with a survival oriented brain. It just takes a little longer for the brain to be able to open up to the secure attachment skills that we suggest, but these are things that you can work with and can get much better. You can move towards crossing the bridge to secure attachment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diane. There's a lot of questions about resources. To learn more, to self-heal, all of that.
I'll just grab my books. I can show you that in case it helps. This is the Power of Attachment that I wrote. And I also have an audio. If you like to listen to CDs, we have Healing Your Attachment Wounds. They're both produced by Sounds True, and you can get both of them on Amazon. I have a stack of books on attachment, but I'll give you some books. I don't have them with me to show you, but David Wallen's book, if you're a practitioner or a clinician on attachment and psychotherapy, is an excellent resource. Dan Siegel's books on the developing mind are fabulous on attachment. Rachel Heller and Amir Levine's book called Attached is really helpful and really nice for people if you're dating or you're really looking at it in adult relationship dynamics. That's a very helpful book. The only thing I'll say is that sometimes when people are writing about attachment, they write a little less compassionately about avoidant, and I have a strong reaction to that. I don't agree with it. Avoidance, one connection as much as anybody else, but because they've shut their attachment system down, it appears on the surface that they're not interested. They're interested in the right circumstances, but they have to learn how to open up again, because their whole strategies for survival, which, remember, was an intelligent response to the original situation with a neglectful or rejecting or task-oriented parent, they have to overcome that survival instinct to be alone a lot. But that doesn't mean they don't want connection. Underneath it, everybody wants to connect. They just have different ways they reacted to the wounds they encountered early on, and avoidance learned to just shut down. But some people write about it as if they don't want relationship or avoid people with avoidant attachment. I don't agree with that. You just have to understand compassionately what the person's managing, at whether they're avoidant or ambivalent or disorganized, and then you move forward. And, you can also, if you're dating, there's certain ways you can recognize if someone is more securely attached. You can test that in a relationship. You can see how the responsiveness is. Are they responding in a timely manner, not too much, not flooding you with texts and emails, but they're responding respectfully. If you have a need that you express, are they try to meet it, or try to help you find a resource for it? Are they available to need? There's different ways you can test for people that are a little bit more oriented to secure. But as long as two people are really willing to work towards secure, a lot of good things can happen. That doesn't mean everybody should be together. Some people need to leave or move on to a different relationship. Those are big decisions everybody has to make. But keeping your attachment bond alive and nurtured and well can be really beautiful and helpful. And I just think, work is fine. I love my work. I absolutely love my work, but I really also cherish my relationships. So I think that, especially in the United States, sometimes we get so production oriented and so work oriented. We don't spend as much time in nurturing our relationships, and many people do a good job of that. But just see what happens if you water the plant more, if you're able to learn secure attachment yourself and be a person who can initiate that in relationships, and a person that can know when repair needs to happen in a relationship and be brave enough to initiate it. And sometimes that's hard to do, but you can become a beacon of secure attachment. I think the more of us that commit to that, and take some healing. I got a lot of healing I had to do too. I mean, it's a lot that can happen, that has to happen sometimes, but we can move in that direction. And then we can help. I think we can help the world in a really significant way. If everybody was practicing moving back to secure attachment, we'd have a much different world. In a generation or two, I think we could be very kind to each other and compassionate and loving. And that's my vision. That's my fantasy. And I hope it's not just a fantasy. I hope that helps.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. I think that's kind of a perfect way to wrap things up.
Great. Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you, Abby. And I really appreciate this time that we've all been able to have together. Remember, we're all on Zoom, but we're all interconnected. So feel the community. It's a really beautiful gathering today. Thanks you for letting me be part of it.